everyone, and welcome to Learn with AI YouTube channel. And many thanks to all those who are with me. My name is Claire, and let's get started with our next module. In this module 2, I am going to talk about basic data types in Python, so let's get started. Our first data type is integer. So, what is an integer? In Python, an integer is a whole number that doesn't have a decimal or a fraction, and it can be positive, negative, or 0. We can represent an integer using the built-in int data type. I will discuss about built-ins later in the video, so here is an example of assigning an integer value to a variable. In this example, we assigned the integer value 5 to the variable a. So now we know that 5 is an integer, which is assigned to a. So when we print type of a, it will give us int. Type is a built-in function that is used to return the data type of data stored in the objects or variables in the program. So in our example, the type function returns int. We can perform arithmetic operations on integers in Python, such as addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Here's an example of performing addition using two integers. We are assigning the integer value 5 to the variable x, and the integer value 10 to the variable y. Let's take another variable z, which will add both x and y together. Finally, we are using a print function for the value of z, which is 15. So this is the way by which we can add two numbers. Next, our second data type in the list is float. Float is a built-in numeric data type that represents real numbers with a decimal point. Let's take an example. I am taking x as a variable, which is equals to 539. So this 539 represents that it is a float value because it's in decimal point. Let's print the type of x. We know that 539 is a float or a decimal number, which is assigned to the variable x. So it returns a float value. Let's take another example. A is equals to 10, and b is equals to 3. Let's divide a by b by taking a variable called c. We have to print the c so that it can return a value. So c returns 333. So c returns a float value. When we print the type of c, it will return a float value. If you want to make c as an integer value, then we can also use integer division using the two forward slashes. It is an operator. So let's run again. Look, it gives us an integer value. We can also use typecasting here, but I will talk about later. Next, third data type is string. Now after this topic, I will introduce you to a new function which is input. This is an example of a string. In our previous module, we talked about how you can write your name. I hope you all remember. First, we take a variable and start with the quotes, and inside them we have to write any text like 1, 2, 3, learn with AI. When we print this variable, it will return our text. Let's print the type of this variable. This is a variable that holds a string value. So a string is a sequence of characters enclosed within quotation marks. It can be either single quotes or double quotes. It is commonly used to represent text data. It can contain numbers, alphabets, and symbols. As I already told you, I will introduce you to a new function, which is input. So input function waits for the user to enter the text from the keyboard and returns the entered text as a string. Let's take an example. We are taking name as our variable. So I want to take the input from the user that, what is your name? So we can write a string which contains, what is your name? But before this string, we have to use input function. So let's write it. And we have to print this name variable. So when we run this, it will ask you to enter a name. So let's write a name. And after this, when we press the enter button, it will give us the name that we entered, which means it is taking user's input and storing it in a name variable. So this line, what is your name, is only for display. I hope you understand. Next, our fourth data type is Boolean. In Python, bool is a built-in data type, which can only have two possible states. It can be either true or false. Boolean values are often used in control flow statements such as if, else, and while. But we will discuss this topic later. So let's take an example to create a Boolean variable. A is a variable that holds the Boolean value true, and B is a variable that holds the Boolean value false. Let's print the type of A. So it is a Boolean type. We can also create Boolean values using comparison operators such as greater than, less than, greater than equals to, less than equals to, and equals to, and not equals to. So let's take a variable A, which is equals to 5. Let's take another variable B, which is equals to 3. We are going to print a comparison between A and B using comparison operators. Let's use print function and we can write a greater than B. So, by this Boolean expression, I want to ask the compiler whether it is right or wrong. Similarly, we will take another, which is A is less than B. Next, A equals to B. And not equals to B. So let's run this program. So here, it first shows true because 5 is greater than 2 or A is greater than B. Similarly, our second print function is showing false, which is again right because B is less than A, or we can say that 2 is smaller. Next, it is showing false because when we use the operator equals to, it checks. If two values are equal, then it returns a Boolean value of true. If the two values are not equal, then it returns false. So our next print function is showing true. As I told you guys before, these two values are not equal. Our fifth data type is none. None is a built-in data type that represents that a variable or function argument does not have a value. So it does not mean that the variable is equal to 0. Let me try to explain it more clearly through an example. Let's take variable name bool1, which is equals to none. So when we print the type of bool1, it will return as none type. So our variable bool1 does not contain anything or does not have a value. Listen, please make sure to do all these exercises side by side. These exercises will make it easier for you to remember things, and you will understand the concepts very well. So let's jump into our next topic, which is typecasting. Typecasting or type conversion is the process of converting a value from one data type to another data type. Just a while ago, I told you about data types like integer, float, Boolean, etc. So if we want to change one data type to another, or in simple terms, if want to change the data type, like integer to Boolean, or string to integer, then we can change it easily. Let's understand it with an example. So let's take a variable a, which is equal to 7.8. So we know that a contains a float value. Let's print a, and the data type of a. Here it returns 7.8, and the data type is float. So let's convert the data type of a into integer value. I am going to use the same print method, but we have to insert a function which is int. So int is a built-in function for typecasting. It will change the data type to integer. Let's run it. So we got 7 and it is an integer. Similarly, we can take a string, as I told you before. String can contain numbers, alphabets, etc. Let's take variable name x, which contains a string 22. When we print this variable x, it will return 22. So is it similar to integer? No, it's not. Let me try to explain it more clearly. Let's take another variable y and let's multiply x and 2. So when we print this variable y, what will be the output? So let's run it. So our output is this. So you must be thinking that the answer should have been 44. So why is it showing double 2 and double 2? So the answer is that it is string, and as I already told you, string is like a text or message, so 22 is only a text. When we multiply 22 by 2, it will generate the duplicate text 2 times because we multiply it by 2. Let's multiply it by 3 and it will repeat this variable a 3 times. I hope you understand. You should ask me a question. So how do I multiply it by 3 so the result will be 22 times 3, which is 66? So the answer is typecasting. You must change this string into an integer. So let's convert it. We can write int before this 22, so that will take it as an integer. Let's run it again. So the output is 66. Note that if it contains non-numeric characters, then it cannot be converted to an integer. So this is the way by which you convert a string into an integer. Similarly, we can convert a string into a float. Let's take 34.5 as a string. So when we run this, it will return us a decimal value, which is 34.5. Let's convert this string into a float value. You must change this string using typecasting to convert it into float. So let's run it again, and our output is 34.5. Similarly, we can convert integer into string. Let's take 3 as our integer, and when we convert this 3 into a string using typecasting, it will give us a string as an output. Let's check whether it is a string or not. As I told you guys before, to check the data type of a variable, we use the type function. So we can print the type of this variable. When we run this, it will return us string. This is the last example that I am taking. We can also typecast a string or an integer into a Boolean type. Boolean value can only return true or false. So to make it clear, Boolean will return true if the integer number is positive or negative, and if the integer number is 0, then it will return false. Let's take a variable which is equals to 1. When we change its data type to Boolean using typecasting, it will give us true. As I already said, number can be positive or negative, but not equals to 0. Let's change this. Let's change this number to -1, then run it. So again, our output is true. Let's change it again. Now this time we are taking 0. If you know the answer, make sure to comment down below with timestamps. This will let me know whether you understand or not. Let's run it. Our output is false because number cannot be equals to 0. Similarly, we will do for string. So for the string, if we want to convert it to the Boolean type, using typecasting. So our output will return true if the string is not empty, and if the string is empty, then it will return us false. Let's take an empty string, so what will be the output? You can pause the video, so the answer is true. Let's run it. Yeah, as I said, string is not empty, but you must be thinking that the string does not contain anything. So look carefully, the string is not empty, because it contains a space. So this is not an empty string. Let's take a real empty string this time. Let's run it. So the output is false. One more. Let's take a random string which can be anything like 124. Learn with AI. Let's run it. So the output is true.